All right, so this collar goes around, goes down inside of here, and then its job is to get rid of our end play in this way. So right now we are separating the foot from the I was trying to get this thing separated, and this is such a tight fit in here that I'm having a hard time driving, getting this thing to go all the way through. And I'm even more concerned that if I did get it out, I'd end up not being able to get it back in. So I've decided that I'm oiling it up good, and I pulled it off as far as I could, put oil on the shaft, and then pushed it back through. So I'm just going to leave this piece on here. So what I'm planning on doing is I'm going to go ahead and bolt the end cap back on before I actually do any painting, so that I can go ahead and I'll seal this up, and then I'll paint all of it while it's on here. I don't know, hopefully it'll work out okay. Or I may go ahead and paint the cap and then paint this. I don't know, I'll figure it out here in a minute. But right now I've got this thing is lubed up, and it's turning, pretty easy. So and then to adjust this, when you have it all back together, you just loosen up these caps, or loosen this cap up, because the cap is what's kind of taking the slack out of the gearbox in this direction. So you put the cap on, put the bolts in, and tighten it up, and that's what you get the slack out of this direction, and then you get that ring that goes over here that we'll do here in a minute, that takes the end play out of it. So we'll I'm going to finish getting it cleaned up, and then we'll get back over on the other table. All right, so we're gonna put a coat of paint on it. Hopefully we'll get it clean enough to stick. So all we're doing is polishing up the handles and some of the bolts and stuff that are going back in the unit. So now we're going to Put our cap back on here. We've polished up these bolts and put new washers on them. So now we're going to zero out the head here. And lock those down. I think I'll put a wrench over there. Oh, it wasn't even the right wrench. You want these fairly snug because I believe that that's all that keeps the head square or level. So that should do us there. So now we've got the end cap on, so what we're going to do next is we're going to go through and get this top piece put back on. And a couple things about this, there's a couple of these little dust covers or whatever you want to call them. One of them slides down here, and then the other one ends up here at the front. So, and it's basically so when you rock the top piece back so that you can freewheel this thing, you don't want to get dust and stuff in, or shavings and stuff down inside the gear. And so what these things do is it basically blocks off those openings when they come out. So you can see here, I don't know how well you can see, but you can see there's a little spring that's actually down in here. And so one of the covers will sit on this spring and it basically pushes it in and out, and then the other one sits down here on the other side. So we'll take a look at it when we get around to it, but I'm going to go clean this piece up first and get it ready to put back on the unit. It's funny how you start off your project and you get yourself all organized and clean your work table off so that you can keep everything together. And before you know it, you got tools everywhere, parts everywhere, and everything's piled up again, even though you were planning to keep everything organized. So this is the screw that goes into the end of it's really just a cap screw that fills in one of the, I think the locking screw that locks the spindle is here, and then, but you can flip this to make it come off the other end, in which case you would move the locking screw down here. So this other screw that I'm cleaning right now is actually just a cap screw that goes in whichever end you're not using. All right, so we'll go ahead and put a little oil on this. And I was thinking, because both of these holes actually go down to this shaft, I was thinking about just squirting some oil. Just squirt some oil down in here just to give it a little extra lubrication. There's not a lot of place for it to go, but in fact, it might not be much of any place for it to go. Alrighty. Alright, so we got our cap in, and now this is nothing more than just a bolt that goes down through there. It's a square bolt for tightening down on the shaft. And evidently there used to be a wrench that hung on the thing that you would use to tighten this up, and I don't know if there's a spring-loaded piece that's down inside here that I really can't get to very easily, unless I guess the only way to get to that would be to put take the shaft out, which I definitely don't want to do. So I'm just going to clean this up and put it back in, but there was a wrench that should have come with it that didn't. Not that it really matters because it's just a wrench. Looks like a 3/8 or thereabouts. Everything so far has been in standard, so it hadn't had to pull any metric wrenches out yet, which is good because I don't have a lot of metric wrenches. There's a little oil on the threads. This one I'm not going to go quite as far because I don't think this goes all the way in. So that's as far as that goes, and I wanted to see if there is a catch or something in there. It doesn't look like it. It looks like all it does is puts pressure on the thing, because it definitely stops it from turning, but we'll just leave it fairly loose there and move on to our next step, which I think probably makes sense to go ahead and put this collar back on the end. So the collar that goes down here is its goal is to get rid of the slop from end to end here. So we're gonna go ahead and get that done. That's the spring piece that goes up here that locks your wheel in place. We gotta clean it up. It's got some grooves in it where it's sat in that thing, but it's not too bad. We'll just oil the spring up and get all that stuff put back in there in a second. So here is our locking collar that gets rid of the slop in the thing, and you'll notice there's a Allen head screw here that actually closes this thing up, so it's a split collar. So you screw it on, it's threaded, you screw it on and then tighten it down to get rid of the slop in the piece. So I'm gonna clean this up real quick. Not in too bad a shape. Just some very light surface rust on this. So good enough. The threads are fairly clean. I'll put some oil on them to make sure. In fact, I'll just put it on the shaft here, probably be easier. All right. So all that's going to happen here is this thing just screws in. Make sure we got the thread started right. I don't remember. I'm assuming it goes on this way because you almost need the Allen head to be down here at the bottom so you can actually get the wrench on it down past where the... All right, so now what we're going to do is we're just going to tighten, just snug it down just enough that we eliminate the back and forth, but not enough that we're going to be too tight. And then find out which wrench it is that fits this thing. And we can come back and do this again if we need to. That one's too big. Now that I think about this, that thing actually has two screws, I believe, that go in here that actually locks this collar to the plate, I think. Let me take this back off and look at it real quick. No, those are just for a spanner wrench. But I don't think I'm going to need a spanner wrench because it seems like it's doing a pretty good job of getting rid of the slop. The only question is going to be whether it's going to lock down enough to keep it from moving, because at the moment it's not locking down near enough. There we go. So no slop, and it's locked down, so we're good there. So now that is good. So I'm gonna put a little bit more oil in here in these gears just to give it a little bit of lubrication. All right, so now we got the slop out of the gear. And so our next thing that we're gonna try to accomplish is this piece is where our all of our pieces go. And so we've got to get the little dust cap things in here with these springs, and then we got to somehow, this piece does not really want to slide in there very good. I don't know if there's a position that it wants to go into. I want to let everybody know that aliens do exist. When we were trying to put this in, the piece, that little triangular piece, fell out and fell down into here. And you could see it sitting right here on the edge. That last time that I flipped this thing upside down and tapped it on the bottom, the thing disappeared. I assumed that it fell down inside of here because it's the only thing that makes any sense, even though I don't know how you fall down when you're upside down, because it would have had to fall up. But I just figured the oil grabbed hold of it and pulled it in. So since then, I rolled up some paper towel and ran the paper towel around the thing. It looks like this cavern in here where this gear runs is just a circular cutout. It doesn't look like it has any, caverns or anything down in it for anything to get stuck. I ran a piece of paper towel down this way until it came back out this side over here. It pushed all the oil out and cleaned everything. I then ran it this way until it came out that way. And I've blown air in this way and this way. I've gotten all kinds of dirt and trash and stuff out of it, but I have gotten no little brass plate. So it leaves me to wonder if the thing didn't pop out and fall on the floor somewhere, but I can't find it. So the project is kind of on hold for a minute while I try to find where in the hell this little piece of brass went. All right, I found the aliens. So here's the funny part. When I flipped it upside down, it must have fallen out, but it has oil all over it. So when I flipped it back over and started looking and I couldn't find it, which it turned out to be a good thing because at least I got this thing cleaned out even better than I had it. But the piece fell down here on the bottom of the tray. It had oil on it and it stuck to the bottom of this thing. So every time I picked this up to look under it, that piece was stuck to the bottom of the unit. So good job. Let's start this train all over again. All right, I'm not going to pull it back out to show you, but so what I did is I tilted this thing up here and I stuck my finger down to hold the piece in, and then I pushed it down at an angle far enough down that I think it held it in as I pushed it down. So the problem is I don't know how to verify that I actually have it in. I think I'm going to tilt it up a little bit. I'm going to get my scope. I'll get the scope and see if I might be able to see it. Let's see, there's the block. I can see the little piece of brass. It's not flipped out or anything, so I'm gonna have to call it good. It looks like it's in the, I'll see if I can video this so that you can see it. But there's the piece of brass, and it looks like it's captured inside of the little groove. So it's pretty uniform in there. So we're gonna call that good. out of the way. So now what we're going to do is we're going to push that into place. So we have our gear in here. Now what we've got to do is we've got to, tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and put some more oil, because I pretty much soaked all the oil up out of here when I did all of my investigatory work. We'll get a little bit of oil down in there. All right. Now what we're going to do is see if we can get all of this to work. I'm not sure. All right, let's go ahead. We're going to go ahead and put this pin back in, because this is what holds this block in. All right, I'll put a little bit of oil on this just to help it slide through. And now, let's see, looks like it's fairly close to being lined up right where it's at. Go ahead and get my thing here. Looks like I'm cleaning the hole out. All right. Tap it just a little bit more. Looks like that is good. All right, so we now have this piece back together. Now, what happens is when we unscrew that piece, it allows us to tilt this up and then freewheel this. And then when you push the Allen head in, it ends up causing it to push it down and eventually grab hold of the gear, at least in theory. At the moment, there we go. So that ends up pushing down on the gear, and I don't know if you can see it in the video, but the shaft is spinning now. So now what we got to do is we are going to, actually before we do that, we're going to take these screws here and clean them up a little bit. All right, so now let's see what our luck is going to be like, because now what we got to do is we got to get this piece to sit in here, which I don't think is going to be too big of a problem, because it's at least flat, but looking at it, it is going to be a little bit of a problem. let's see if I put this here and then slide it across. It appears, oh, might help if I put it across and slide it across on the right end. All right. We're gonna put one screw there, one screw there. All right, so basically what should happen is if I push this down, we should be freewheeling, and we are. If I pull this up and get the gear locked in there, now we should be turning with the wheel, and we are. So there's a little bit of slop in there, but that's because we don't have everything tight yet. Hopefully that's why. So let's get the rest of these screws. All right, and so now what we're going to do is we are going to tighten up this Allen head here. Which should push our gear into place. And so now it is, so we have played this way, and it seems like this other, because we've got a little bit of play in the gear here, so I'm gonna have to figure out exactly how to get that adjusted out, because of course, one thing is once we put the plates and stuff back on here, that's gonna lock that into place so that it stays up here, so, and then you don't have, there still is a little bit of play there. There, that got it out. So that's got that taken care of. So now where we're at is we can go ahead and clean up this guy and put it back into place, which is the locking pin for the, to lock the plate on the back groove here. And then we're going to stick our spring in, turn it around, get it all lubed up a little bit. Turn it around. All right, and then this piece is going to go into our spring. So I'm going to stick a little bit of oil in here. That's going to go into there. Should have enough. Then we're going to take our polished little handle and we're going to get it started back into here, hopefully. right, so that is now working and actually works. Put a little bit more lube on the outside of the shaft here. Oh yeah. All right, so that thing can go over there now, or it can go out and lock. So very cool. So that is back together. So now our next goal here is to get these threads cleaned up a little bit, which they're really not in that bad of condition. But we'll go ahead and get the little, actually let's use a screwdriver here. All right, so the next thing that we're going to try to do is, this is the pin that goes in. You basically pull this out, move it around to whatever hole in the plate you want, and then let it go, and it goes and sets it so that you've got it in the right position to cut the gear. It has a set screw in here that keeps it lined up here, but this is, it gets stuck out here on the end. The end is kind of flared up a little bit, so I'm going to see if I can get that fixed. I don't know exactly how this comes apart, so I'm going to see if I can figure that out, because I'd like to take it apart and see if I can't fix it. But the it almost looks like it's pressed in here, and I don't really want to mess with all that. So we'll see if we can get it going here without doing a lot of extra work. All right, so now it's pulling all the way out without dragging. So we'll finish cleaning it up, and we should have this thing ready to put back on. Put the rest of this back together. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and put a little bit of oil in here, and in here, just to let that thing get a little lubricated. So that is actually working now, because this piece wasn't working at all earlier. Now all we're going to do is screw our chuck on. pretty tight fit on everything. So, all right, and then we just need to tighten the head up. So I'll put this in the vise, and I'll put a cheater bar through here and just snug it. You don't have to get it super tight because this thing doesn't spin, but it is, you know, you have to get it tight so the part doesn't move when it's in there. So we'll put it in the vise here in a minute and finish tightening this thing up so it doesn't move. And so what happens now is you've got your little wheel here, or your little pin that will lock this thing so that it won't move. And so now the last thing that we got to do is put the actual plate, the whatever plate you want on it, on there. But in any case, all right, so now what we got to do is we got to figure out the order of all this stuff going back together. So we have the plate that actually gets screws in it that screw it to this back plate. So that's the first thing that you have to do. One of the problems that I have is this collar that goes on here that locks all of the drive part of this thing together. The threads are messed up on it, and I need to get them fixed before I put this thing back on. Somebody's cross-threaded it, and they're pretty jacked up. And I don't have a tap this big, so I've got to go run up here and see if any of my buddies have a tap big enough to fix this, and I'll be back. All right, so that is a 5/8 18 thread. I got the tap and die because both threads are messed up. I've already tapped the collar, but now I'm trying to get this on the, get it. All right, so we'll just set this somewhere because at this point we don't really know. We're not doing anything with putting it back together. So that piece goes on there like that, and so that is just going to spin around this way. All right, so that goes on, and then we have this little washer, which is just that had just enough had a burr on it and stuck a piece of metal in my hand. So be careful when you're cleaning this little bastard. I'm assuming it's got a key. It's got a little key in it right there. So I'm assuming that is going to go up in that keyway right there to give us some little springiness to all of what we're about to do. I'll go ahead and take this out for just a second so I can see down in the hole. It's not quite down far enough. There we go. And I'm gonna line that, and this has a kind of hard to see it here, but it has a little foot on it that actually slides in this groove here. So this thing doesn't actually tighten down all the way, it just tightens down until it gets into that groove, so that it keeps this piece from turning. So it basically gives you the ability to, or where I can still pull it, but it keeps the handle from turning. I'm not real sure why that matters, but that's the way it was, so we'll put it back in there that way. All right, so one of the things that I missed is the collar that has the 2 set screws in it that we fixed the threads on. It has to go on inside of this drum. So it's basically going in here, and what we're doing is we're getting rid of the end play with this. So we want this to turn, but we don't want to have a lot of back and forth. So we adjust that to where we don't have a lot of back and forth, and then we come in here and tighten down these set screws. The only thing that I mean, it would have been nice, but I don't know how you'd actually pull it off, is the shaft has got a flat spot in it, but there's no way to really take advantage of it for these set screws. But all we're really doing with this is getting rid of the end play, so, and we still want everything to turn free. So we're not going to totally tighten those down, but we're not going to crank down on them, but we want to make sure that we don't have any end play. All right, so the next thing, once we get that on, we've got our spring on here. So this piece is going to go in, and as you can see, it pushes on that spring, that the washer that's in there. The next thing that has to happen is this piece. So the flat pieces that are on here line up with the flat of this. So we're going to basically put that in there like we want it, and then tighten down the washer and the nut. Now what we want to have happen is the tit on the end of the screw is going to fit into one of the holes in the plate. So you would basically figure out what size gear and which line of holes you want to be in, and then you're going to set this in here so that it lines up with that row. So we'll say that this is the row that we want to be in. Now one thing I'm noticing is that the end of this is not setting all the way down in these holes. I would expect them to go in a little bit farther. I don't know if I've got the wrong play. I don't feel a burr or anything on here, so I don't know what the deal. I don't know if they've dropped this, but it barely fits in those holes, which I guess you want a tight fit, so it feels like it's okay now. So we're gonna go ahead and we'll say that this is the row of holes that we want to get in, and so we're gonna set this in here, get everything lined up, and then the next thing you have is you've got a washer here, a thick spacer of sorts. It goes on, and then we've got a nut that goes on after that. I want to clean this nut real quick. So we'll put the nut on. And then we're going to get our plate lined up here. Get our wrench wherever we put it on our organized workbench. I just had the thing a minute ago. What do I do with those 2 wrenches? They were sitting right here, and now they are gone. But in any case, I'll tighten it down by hand for now. So now we've released this. We should be able to pull back on this guy. Should be able to pull back on this guy, and then as you can see, the The head rotate, the chuck rotates while we're doing this. Everything is nice and smooth. And then you would just go through and find the hole that you fit in. And so when you pull the plunger out, it goes into the hole, and then that's where you're gonna do your next gear. And then you slide it around, and so what happens is this guy has these teeth in it. So if you pretend that this is, we'll come in here and pretend that there's our gear, then we would line this up. We'd come over here, do our next hole, and then you just shove this around to here, and then you know where your next hole is. So you set that to match the gear ratio that you have, and you just keep moving it around until you get the whole gear done. So that's basically how the thing works. We've got it all cleaned up. So here's the face plate, plunger, all this works now. None of this was working when I got this, or it was very, very difficult to pull that thing out. And then we got our collar here is the one that actually gets rid of the play from end to end this way. The nut that we put on in here, or the collar that we put in here, is what gets rid of the play going this way. And then we've got our set screw here, which basically the inside set screw locks this thing down to where the gear works. If you loosen this to about the 1/2 inch out, then you can push down on this whole mechanism, and then it lets this free spin. And then we've got our lock here that locks into the back of this plate to keep everything from moving. And then we redid the back here. The chuck is about as clean as it's going to get. We took it apart too, so it's all been redone as well. So, but that is the whole restore of the Ellis dividing head.